So what is a podcast? It's kind of all over the place. Joe Rogan has a podcast, but he also has video. He's got a bunch of stuff. Stratton and his wife have what they call the Unpodcast. Marketing O'Clock is based up in upstate New York, and with Greg Finn and his company. And they actually have a round table where they film it, but then they produce it as a podcast as well. So it's a bit of a, which comes first, the audio or the video? In some cases, it's kind of all at the same time. What we did for our podcast is, because my co-host was in Arizona and I was here in Chicago, and half the time our offices were messy. It was weird times of the day. We created a shell for our videos that was just a placeholder. And so we created a podcast, but we were able to push it out into Instagram with using Canva and placeholders. We had a basic placeholder for our videos on YouTube. And so we were able to push it to any channel we wanted in any way. But it was technically a podcast. But you can do it any of them. Does anyone here follow Aleda Solsis? She has Crawling Mondays. She has a video first that I don't even think she turns into a podcast. I should actually yell at her about that. But it's just whatever makes sense for you, whatever platform, just use that. So baby steps. Even for those that said they're not interested in podcasting, look at it for link building, PR awareness. Even if you don't want to create your own, there is a ton of people. If you really want to find people looking for guest posts, don't. Look for people that have a podcast that want a guest. There are tons of Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups. In the Facebook groups, it's crazy. If you've ever looked at Help a Reporter Out Harrow, there are so many people every single day with a podcast looking for guests. Start there. It can be self-promotion, part promotion. Get started. Understand what you want to do. Is this something you want to do? Is it worth your time? Does your sound suck? Is it great? Do you need better tech gear? And then if you do have a podcast, you can use it to promote yourself. And I can't go back. There was 2 resources on the bottom there where they send out an email every day. So even if you don't want to go and look in Facebook groups and pay attention, you can just kind of sign up to those newsletters and get free opportunities every day. When you do pitch, if you are to pitch yourself for a podcast, please don't do this. And it might be a little small, but it basically says, PodQuest inquiry, my name is blank and I represent blank. I looked into your brand and thought you'd be a great guest please email me. Why? Why would I have you on my show? Scott Stratton, and if you follow this link, it takes you to a LinkedIn, and there's just story after story after story of horrible pitches. And there are companies out there that will pitch you. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. I'm not going to call out any names, but if you ever are thinking about looking at one, you want to talk to me, I can tell you which ones have given me good pitches and which ones just blast me with the most non-relatable people to my audience at all. Or actually think through the podcast and your pitch. This is one of my friends who went to school who is now an antitrust lawyer. And anyone here that has to deal with Facebook, Google, and search engines hears about antitrust, whether it's Android or Facebook or the EU. And he was talking with one of his old college buddies and realized he's an antitrust lawyer and thought, wow, that would be a great topic for us to talk about. Oh my God, it was awesome. We did 2 episodes where we dug into differences between the EU and the US, what Google, Facebook, and everything have to do. We talked about Android. We talked about all sorts of interesting things. That was an awesome guest that we never would have thought of. And we also did a podcast episode. Another good thing about podcasting or video or whatever you want to do is it becomes a great resource for your customer service, for your sales, for your marketing. Some people like to read, some people like to listen, some people like to watch. It gives different ways for people to get to things. So why a podcast? Short answer I already kind of talked about. We're slow at writing. I've written articles for SEMrush and for various places. It takes me so long. I can create this deck of 90 slides faster than I can write a 700-word article, honestly. It's a good article, but it just takes me so long. So for us podcasting, we produce so much more content. Over 4 years, 3 to 4 hours a month, maybe a little bit more, we produce 200 episodes. So tell me you can create that many pieces of written content quicker. Plus, when we use a transcription service, which was almost $10 a month, all of that written content, all of that verbal content then became posts. So how will your podcast be different? What's going to make it stand out? When you start thinking about your podcast, start asking those basic questions, depending on your vertical. I just saw one that there's now 40 plus SEO related focused podcasts. I'm sure there's another 30 just on paid search. I'm sure there's 25 to 50 on Facebook advertising. I'm sure there's a bunch in every vertical. Think about what you want to do from it. What do you want to get out of it? How you market it. How long should your episodes be? Our goal when we thought about it, and I was going to tell a long story about how my garage door was basically broke this morning, and I actually had to wake up my wife and say, I've had some back problems this week. I couldn't open the door by myself because the spring broke. And I'm like, I'm speaking in an hour and a half, and I need to get downtown. Telling long stories like that, for some, who skips your Netflix? When Netflix says next episode, who skips? You're all lying. But everyone here skips it. Who binge watches anything? Who binge listens to podcasts? You always skip. Who wants to hear that 40-second intro every single time? Who wants to hear 5 to 20 minutes of banter between the two co-hosts? You're like, no, I just want to get to the topic that you're talking about today. I had a friend who was on a large podcast, hour-long podcast. Minute 35 or so, they finally started to interview her. I just kept skipping to try to get to that part. So when we thought about our podcast, we were like, where would people listen to it? What is our goal? What do we want to do? We were like, someone that's, doing a quick workout run, 15, 30 minutes most. Someone that's, commuting, drinking their coffee, something. Our goal was 20 minutes. And so we had I think a 12-second or a 10-second kind of quick intro sound where it just says our show name. We would go right into asking, making sure that we were recording, how we were doing, one question maybe just to make sure our mics were working, and then we would go right into it, introduce our guests, introduce the topic, and just go into it. Maybe you have a community, maybe you have other stuff to do. Think about what makes sense for you, for your audience. If you are going to create a podcast, I highly, 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 highly suggest creating a website or a category page and standalone page on the site for your main site. Please don't just put it on Podbean. Please don't just use a third-party site. From an SEO standpoint, it's already going to show up there, but you have better control of it. What happens if you sell that or want to sell it off? What if you want to move it around? What if you change the brand? You don't have the same control. Is it good for rankings? I'm sure everyone here likes to search management styles, the Super Mario effect, but if you did, our podcast would show up. And there's a lot more ways for different things that show up. Google's starting to show podcasts. So if you're in a very competitive keyword in SERP, where you can create your podcast and have a video, so you have a video opportunity to rank, you have an image thumbnail, and now you've got a podcast, and now you've got content on your site. Think beyond just writing a piece of content. Think about all the different ways that Google's trying to give content to people. For us, the podcast was just an easier way for us to, one, create content, but two, to get on keywords and target things that otherwise we wouldn't be able to. It's also just another brand. So there's external linking. If you're thinking about link building and all those types of things, there are hundreds, I wouldn't use them all, but there are tons of good and bad directories out there that you can build links from to your podcast. So if you're a lawyer, personal injury lawyer, you can have a personal injury lawyer podcast. If you're, a Downers Grove cleaning service, you can have all of those local links, all those different links and brand awareness for different ways. So some tools, walk through these. This is what we typically use right now on the current site. It's called this isn't the one we use, sorry. PowerPress is one I've looked at. Lots and lots of people use it. It's great. We actually use Simple Podcasting, seriously Simple Podcasting. It comes with a simple stats. It comes with a speaker thing. So anytime you have a guest on, some of my friends have gotten mad because our guest pages or our host guests actually rank really well for them. So as far as attracting guests, we have it's a branding kind of thing for them. And we rank quite well for some of their names. I was going to talk about the other stats. The company we've been using is called Chartable. It's a free service. It's recently been bought by Spotify. But if you're ever thinking about, and I'll get to it, about advertisers or trying to understand your full reach, one of the tools I just talked about does give you some. You can use analytics and other things, but it's its own little beast because everything is being called by MP3 files wherever you're hosting it. And trying to track it, you need a third party. And Chartable is free, and it's really simple. Hosting, if you use Libsyn or some of the other services that are out there, some of them have that type of analytics and tracking. So it just depends on who you go with. As far as getting info, getting questions, we started using a Google Sheet. The number of people that would still find our email address and just blast us for guests or topics and stuff was high. But using a Google Sheet, it's all there, it's all tracked. You don't have to worry about tracking anything. As far as tech and gear, so there's various recorders. You can also just use, this is for on-the-go recorders. So if you were coming to a conference here and if you were a vendor, if you wanted to just do some interviews, or if you're having your own conference with customers and you wanted to get testimonials on the spot, any of these would work. I've seen lots of people use various Zooms and $100 or so, but think about how much time it takes to go and get testimonials from customers. You can also even think about using your podcast and setting up your podcast, maybe not for podcast, but just to capture reviews from clients. And you can use really Zoom if you really wanted to. But just thinking of different ways doesn't just have to be a podcast where it's, some of my friends have one where they talk about beer. I know someone else where they talk about movies and they review them. It doesn't have to be that. You can just reuse the audio for anything you want. So the audio recorders, whether you're at a conference or anything, you can use it for that way. The more it's not really offline, I guess, but it's not in person should be the correct title. But Skype does work on both. If you have more than 2 people, or if someone does have a bad internet connection, bless your soul, it is the worst tool to use. We started with it, and it was handy and interesting, but long-term, it was not the best solution. For Ecamm, if you're a Mac user, Pamela is another one. There's also just apps that you can download. I've used this at conferences myself, just like these little recording apps, just for a quick review after I've been in a session or after I've talked to people. I can write things down and type things on my phone, but I can speak them a lot quicker. And I'll also be able to remember it at 3 a.m. in 3 weeks from now when I'm actually looking at it sometime. There's a lot of VoIP services, which we moved to. A couple of years ago, we were using Zencastr, and it was great. For a while, we ended up having a problem with it. Zoom is interesting. If you already have a corporate Zoom set up, there is a feature that you can go in and turn on, and it can record and download everything, and it'll record it in really high quality. And it'll actually record each person that's speaking. You have to put it together afterwards, but if you already have Zoom and you're just trying to play around with it and you don't want to invest a lot or learn a new system, or trying to get the CFO to jump on a call to actually talk about something, or if there's someone internal at the company and you're like, you don't have anything crazy to download, just here's our Zoom link, jump on it, we'll record it, we're good. And this is Cast, Ringer. Anchor has been bought, I think, also by Spotify recently, but it's a free small app. This is Cast, it's tricast.com. It's what we've used the last 2.5 years or so. It's a free version or $10 a month, I think. We can have up to 4 or 5 people on. Each person has its own file. I've had some people join us as guests and don't quite understand that if you don't have headphones on and you have a speaker, it picks up everything. And I've literally had to use their entire 50 minutes of talking with us because all you heard was background. And it's just, as a sound guy, just going, no, it's bad. So yeah, TriCast, it's really simple. And like I said, I think we pay $0 or $10 a month. So it's like $120 a month. I mean, think about how much you spend on other tools for creating content. This is really the only thing that's a monthly. Audacity is what I use. There are some crazy expensive tools. I would see people in Facebook groups talking about it. You don't have to do a lot of editing. I honestly had never edited video or sound or anything before I started the podcast 4 years ago. Through some basic YouTube videos and everything, I actually was able to learn. My co-host is a photographer, but has never touched anything with sound. I actually made him go through and use GarageBand and do an own episode. And actually, for his own first episode, you couldn't really tell whether I edited or him. As long as you don't have people that have tons of background noise, editing is not a scary thing. Or you can just put it out live as it is. Transcripts, Descript is an awesome tool. It can edit, but also we would use it for transcriptions. So whether you're creating content, even if you're doing Zooms, I had an account manager who would use, not Descript, but she would use Otter.ai, take a Zoom meeting from a client meeting, put it in there, and then put that in our notes. So there's different ways to use any of this stuff. You can use Descript for the same thing. If you have a meeting or if you have an interview, you can just take it and you can create content for internal or external. Offline tools, you can use a computer mic. I highly don't suggest it, but you could, as long as you wear headphones or earphones or something. You can use a Yeticaster. I just use, I got it on a Cyber Monday sale for I don't know what it was, but it was just a basic Blue Yeti. It's nothing crazy. You can go crazy, and I see crazy podcasting setups. You don't need any of that. Headphones, again, I use $12 Sony headphones that I bought 10 years ago. They work. You can use whatever you want. Cheaper the better. I do use better ones when I edit sometimes, but you don't really need it. As far as getting it out there, is there any questions as I run through? No? Okay. Shoot. Wait. I was going to try to give them a little bit of heads up. Quick break while I have water.
You listed, first of all, thank you for this, but you listed a bunch of apps and all that. Is this going to be available for us after? All right, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, I tried to link every tool, every app in there. Most of them are linked in there, or you can just use the name, This Is Cast or Zencast or any of those. The other thing about it is just getting it out there. Since this podcast, for us at least, was a collaboration between myself and my agency and my friend who has his own agency, it didn't really make sense for it to be either on his site or my site. So we created its own brand, which actually worked out. It was called The Business of Digital. Started a Twitter account. It actually forced me to be on Twitter more, to share on Facebook and LinkedIn more. I try to not spend too much time on any of them, but I actually started sharing news, and it got me just sharing stuff again. You can also just schedule out with any of the typical social media tools. I would go in there on a Monday, post the most recent one, post some stuff for the week, and then I was done. Again, it doesn't have to be a full-time job. It's not that much more, but it just gave me a ton more reason to be sharing on my own social channels for my own brand awareness, for my agencies, for him as well. Whenever you have guests, same type of thing. Started a Facebook page. We were going to start a group. Decided we didn't want to spend that much time on it. You can do whatever makes sense for you and your audience. But a lot of times in certain groups, I had people asking questions. I was able to use our podcast episodes the same way I would use a piece of content. And someone would ask a question about whatever it was about SEO or Amazon marketing. I was able to go back, use our own episode, and send it in there. There's a transcript there. Whether they want to listen, watch the video, or read it, I don't care. But I had a resource that I was able to create in 40 minutes of my time, and here it is 2 years later, I'm using it. Same thing with LinkedIn. I would just answer questions, share it. Especially if you're B2B, why wouldn't you be on LinkedIn? If you want to use LinkedIn or Facebook Live or any of the video, why aren't you integrating them in different ways? Be social. Everyone likes stickers. My computer's over there. It's covered in stickers. Everyone likes stickers. My co-host would travel a lot. And so everywhere he would travel, he would have our little sticker and he would just start taking pictures. So if he was traveling and speaking in Duluth up in Minnesota, he would be at a conference and he would just take a picture of it. If he would travel to Arizona, or not to Arizona, he's from Arizona. If he was in San Francisco, if he was over in Europe, anywhere he was traveling, he'd be taking photos. He had his camera. He would just pop it out, and it was just easy content for us to then share. And we would just, post, like, do we have any listeners here? Just easy content. Just be social. Be real. Promote all the ways. Let your, your guests know when you're going live. They're going to promote it for you. That is the one good thing. I don't suggest having a guest-driven podcast, but if that makes sense for you, do it. We were not. Of the 200 episodes, I think we had guests on 40 to 50 of them. So scheduling can be hectic, can be painful. It just depends on what makes sense for you. If it's all internal, if it's just every so often you schedule it, it's okay. But the benefit of having guests is that they freely promote it for you. They promote it on their Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, everywhere for you. There are, I don't know which everyone's player of choice is here, but these are the big three. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, there's, Caster, there's I forget its name. There's at least 10 that show up in my analytics every month. These three by far, 70, 80, 90% of our listeners. So if you're thinking about getting out there, those are the biggest ones to look at. Stitcher is the other one. And then there's just a list of different apps and directories as far as link building, brand awareness. Again, even if you were to just publish podcasts once a month, create it from a link building standpoint, as I am an SEO, I just look at nice ways to get us to links. You can easily get links. I have some clients that I've started working with. One of them had a weekly video that they were doing on YouTube. And my first question was like, where's the podcast on the site? You guys create this 10-minute video every single week. Why aren't you promoting it as a podcast too? You're already doing the hardest part. You already have someone that writes a script, does all this work. Why aren't we using this as a podcast? So the last 2 months, they've started to work on their processes. I think they just got the page up last week, and now they have a podcast completely reusing something they do anyway. But now once it's up, there's all these different directories. There's all these different places we can pitch them. So they already have a YouTube. They already get hundreds and sometimes thousands of views on there. I'm like, why not make it so anyone easily can get to your content? Market your content marketing. This is probably a phrase I've had to say for 10 years now. I spent my first 10 years as an SEO saying, please, can we build content? And then the last 10 years I spent, please, can we stop building content and actually market what we have? If you're going to create any sort of content, whether it is a podcast, written, video series, please market it. Think about what happens after you create the content, just like the podcast. So for us, we thought about different ways to get our name out there. We promoted it almost like not a press release, but we promoted it internally on our own sites. We wrote on Authority Labs. My co-host ended up writing a podcast beginner's guide for SEMrush, which is kind of very similar to this deck, you'll notice, because I had built a similar deck to this. He wrote the podcast, and then we've updated it over the years. but we were just reusing content every which way we possibly could. So final thoughts that we're often asked, can I gain leads? Yes. Just like speaking at a conference, you can gain leads, just like any other piece of content. The number of places where I've dropped it. Now for us, it's a little bit different because he's got a much larger agency than me. Depending on what your goal is it just awareness? Is it specifically trying to get in front of customers? Is it for your client or your clients? Or is it something that you just want to create for your customers? Like Verizon could have something like that. Think about what the goals are. Can you make sales? Yes. We had a couple sponsorships. We worked with some people, various, so not exact sales. But for us, he was trying not to travel and speak at as many conferences. I was looking at ways to do it. We had our podcast and ourselves were listed on a number of places. We had free branding and free awareness, free links from all of it. And it was something we wanted to do anyway. And it was fun for us. Some of the best advice is actually from Bert, which is not something I would have expected. The crazy, I forget his name. When he went to Florida State and so did I. Somehow I didn't run into him, thankfully, or I probably never would have gotten out of school, if you know anything about Bert. But when he created his podcast, these are kind of the steps he said. Just do it. Don't tell anyone about it. Figure it out. Do you want to do solo? Internally at your company, does it make sense to have internal guests? Or does the logistics and legal and other headaches just say, no, we can't do that? Find your style. Do you want it to be informational? Marketing O'Clock is a podcast that covers all of digital marketing that I talked about. Their style is they kind of cover the news on every Friday morning. So if you want to catch up and see what was written about in SEJ, Search Engine Land, what did so-and-so say at Facebook or Google, their goal is to just kind of have a round table and they talk about the news. Figure out what your style is, what format works for you. Do 10, 20, 30. We recorded 5. And then I think we trashed the first couple because sound was bad. We were bad. Something went wrong. We screwed up somewhere. We recorded a couple and then we did a couple more and we actually published those. But we had to figure out what we wanted to do. We spent a couple weeks talking about what format makes sense, what timing, what is our goal. And where we decided was 18, 20 minutes. We pick one topic. We talk about it for 15 to 20 minutes. Let's try not to go over. And that was kind of where we settled. And then we were like, okay, now let's do it. And we tried it. Honestly, if I was to listen to our first 10 versus our last 10, we sucked. And that's fine. But we also didn't promote it at first either. So those are just Bert's kind of summing up notes, and they are very helpful. So since we are here at Soldier Field, I did have to have the coach. Was there any other questions while I try to get some water?
Hello. What social channel did you find the most success with engagement-wise in distributing your podcasts?
Which social channel did we find the most engagement on? Probably, as far as answering questions in groups, Facebook, because I just subscribe to digital marketing and just various social media and all sorts of things. And we kind of covered a large group. And there was always just questions. And it was just really easy to go in there and drop it. As far as promotion, Instagram, I would say, was the least for us, but we were also B2B, and most SEOs aren't looking at Instagram to see a podcast for us. Twitter, as far as getting traffic and other awareness, was probably like on a weekly basis was Twitter for us.
Thank you.
It also just depends on your vertical, your topic. I think there's a question over here. Just throw it.
All right, so I know you can create a lot more content when you're doing podcasts versus writing. So is the value in the quantity, or are you seeing more of an engagement on the podcast than you are on written articles and other mediums?
For us, it was to try to, so my co-host is Matt. He owns co-owns larger agency out in Utah. For him to write 100 pieces of content and for me to write 100 pieces of content, it wouldn't have been as fun. We never would have done it. We wouldn't have been that engaging, and the content wouldn't have been that engaging. So for us, for the topic and what we wanted to do, I think I've spoken at 50 conferences now over the last 10 years. He's spoken at like 150. And to try to figure out a way that we like teaching, we like going out and talking with people, but oh my God, I can only go to so many conferences. And what makes sense? And so we always just got along really well. So for us, it was really easy, whether we were at a bar or wherever, we could just, shoot it and talk with each other, and it was fine. So we're like, we can get online and talk to each other for 15, 20 minutes about whatever topic and, argue or not argue. And we both had worked with so many various clients. For us, it just made sense, and it was really easy. And so I know a lot of our friends that would listen to it and say, oh, that's a good point. But it was also interesting for us. Like, I can read lots of articles, but it was also easier for me to pull some of my friends in who are experts on mobile or whatever topic and go, teach us. And so, like, some of the most interesting topics we talked about, I talked with the former chairwoman of the FTC, which was the scariest thing. We talked to the antitrust lawyer. I talked to a lawyer, Ruth, down in Arizona, where we learned about, how many people here have contractors that write content for them? Who has a written release with them that you own the content? Most people don't. And so in that one, we talked through it, and we were trying to asking just basic questions. And she is a part-time model, but also a photographer and a lawyer. And she's actually had photographers give her own contract to sign, release. And she was like, oh, I know this. I can't get out of this. You own anything you take, and I can never come after you. So it's just really interesting to be able to talk about different topics and just have different people come in, and also getting people to come on and write for you or join something versus we're going to just talk for 15 to 30 minutes. Oh yeah, I can do that. Yeah, here's a couple questions. Here's the topic. It's just easier to get them involved. We had another question.
A lot of my friends.
Wait. Throw it.
Is this the mic? Okay. So a lot of my friends have they've made content and stuff, and like a lot of them, who happen to be either white or male or both, have been like targeted by canceling for just sometimes when you speak in a very like clear, direct way about some topic, sometimes you just piss people off, and then there'll be like a big crowd of people hating and stuff. Has that happened to you yet, or do you have any stories, or do you have friends that have been canceled and their lives have turned into nightmares at all, or anything like that?
Maybe, yes, no. For us, on our show, we would avoid using any politics or anything remotely close as an example, just to avoid anything, because we were two white males too, talking on that. So it was like so many topics we didn't want to even touch. And as far as using examples, we tried to avoid, even at the start, COVID and politics in general. So for us, we just looked at it as, we don't need that as an example. We have so many stories and so many other examples. We don't need to go there. So for us, it was just, unless you're a lawyer that's talking about, something, or you're talking about, I don't even know. I'm just trying to think of someone that might be impacted, like a home builder, and you're talking about, well, we wanted to do this, but because of the jurisdictions and because of the whatever in this county, we've tried to work with this governor or this mayor. Depending on your topic, you might run into it. But for us, we just tried to avoid it as much as possible. Questions over here?
If you're looking to grow SEO and the links, like we were talking about, probably about mid-presentation, getting those better keywords on Google, does it have to be a video upload that you're doing in order to do that? Or are they going to also take podcasts with that as well too?
It depends on the keyword of what you're trying to target. Some topics, Google will show images, especially if you're doing something that's more e-commerce. Sometimes it'll show videos if, depending on that, and I'll talk about it actually with the keyword research, depending on what the modifier is, like best videos editing software. It's going to show you various links, or what is, cheapest Nike Air Jordans near me. It's going to show stores and Google, like what Google shows changes depending on, or the content you try to create will change.
So to follow up on that, then in addition to the YouTube videos though, do you see a comeback for keywords and that type of content as far as the back end of YouTube videos?
You
For
can.
that on Google, on like a Google homepage? Like
You
if
can.
Google something?
And I'm actually getting ahead of myself. I'll talk about it. But when I do keyword research, which is the second part I'm going to dig into, a lot of what I focus on in the client will always be, well, we want this kind of page on this keyword. Well, that's great, but here's what Google shows. Google is showing 5 aggregators. They're showing 2 competitors, and they're showing 3 news sites. So basically, we have to figure out a way to make your content better than your 2 competitors, because your type of content, your type of site is not going to be in the top 10 otherwise. Because Google wants to show and answer different questions based on its AI and all of its learning, that it knows that when people are doing this search, they don't know what they want. And sometimes they're clicking on one of your competitors. Sometimes they're clicking on these aggregators, like best lawn care service. Yelp is going to show up all the time. Angie's List, or any of those types of sites. And then some local companies. So it just depends on what that keyword is and what kind of content you're seeing. Maybe if you're seeing video or image and stuff, there might be a way for podcast, video, image. It's just different types of content. Any other questions? I think we have time for like one more.
I'm curious about your prep work. How much prep do you put into each episode? Do you have a structured outline, or is it more freewheeling?
Nope. For us, it was very freewheeling. We had, and I actually had this slide, but I was trying to fit a lot in today. We had a idea, a Google sheet, where I think by the end of our 200 episodes, we had about 260 ideas. And so every so often, we would just go down the list and be like, well, what's topical? What's seasonal? What did Google just say? Was there an algo update? What makes sense? What bad experience did you just have at Disney World last week, Dave? Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how I couldn't find anything on their websites. And let's talk about what the problem is with hotels and local businesses and what kind of basic, and that's where our ideas would come from. So we had an ongoing, just as if you were writing content, it's like, here's all of our content ideas, here's everything. We would just pick and choose based on what we wanted to talk about that day.
And then on a kind of different topic, how do you know it's working? Oh, I'm sorry. How do you know it's working? How do you know that the podcast is doing what it should? How do you know when it's time to either cut your loss or change your plan?
We hit 200 episodes and we stopped because I was at billable 50 or 110, 120% billable time. So for me personally, I just didn't have time to do it anymore. And 200 was good. We were having a few hundred downloads plus every episode, even at the end when we're only doing like 2 a month. So probably even more than that based on the numbers I was just looking at. So for us, it was, do our friends like it? Are we having fun? Do we like doing it? Would I actually stop? What am I going to do? Would I actually want to write content? No. So do we have time? Are we interested? And for us, it was a hobby, but it was also building our own brand. And it was, depends on what the goal is and how much time it really takes. And for us, it was not a lot of time. So for us, it was worth it.
Thank you.
So shifting gears a little bit, and this will answer some of your questions around, the content and keywords. And so your question, some of the content kind of ideas, this will help answer that as well. So does keyword research still matter? When should you do it? Who here works in-house is what I call it, not at an agency. So 60% maybe. Who here has done keyword research in the last year? A lot more than I thought. Here's a few reasons to do it. New product launch is always a good one. New business or new business line, depending on where you work at. Did they just decide to add a new e-commerce project, or did you just buy a competitor or a add-on? If you're in the insurance space, maybe you're offering a new line or a new type of insurance to your business. If you're in the agency side, I'm sure for new clients, new content piece, whether it's for PR or for to promote something for seasonality. Who wrote some content for Mother's Day just recently? 1, 2. Who did keyword research for Mother's Day? A little bit. And how long ago did you do it? Probably 3 months ago, hopefully. Yeah. So trying to get ahead of stuff. Or as I like to say, any day that ends in Y is kind of a good reason to do keyword research, but I wouldn't do it every single day. If you have that much time, please talk to me later, because I would love to know how you have that much free time and how I can replicate myself to do that. But for me, any new client, anytime I work with a client, even if they tell me that they've worked with an agency that has done keyword research, I go, that's awesome. Let me see it. We're going to do our own. Because I don't know what it is. I don't know how long ago it was. We just started working with a large e-commerce client. And I asked him, when's the last time you did keyword research? And honestly, their top 100, 150 keywords don't change, but the outskirts do, and what other people are writing about does, and everything else changes. So he was like, 2 years ago, let's do it again. And we found all sorts of opportunities. So when you start looking at keyword research, it goes to the intent is my first thing I start looking at. Is it informational? What is? I work with some lawyers, and I also work with some insurance companies. I kind of work with all sorts of different companies. What is X is very top of funnel. I used to work here in Chicago for a payroll company. What is a payroll service? And I know there's a vendor out here that offers payroll. I'm sure they actually have people that ask that very simple question. That is, for me, depending on the keyword and client, something that might make sense. So every type of keyword is got its own little caveat depending on what you do. But what is payroll service might make sense. But what is a payroll service provider? Same type of keyword, but a little bit more specific. They actually know a little bit more. So for me, that's, depending on how they're phrasing things. Navigational, if anyone here has a large support team, customer service, honestly look at these types of searches. Look at things where people are asking questions about your product. If you have an e-commerce or you're a manufacturer, look at those. That might be content that you're missing on your site, on your product pages. If you have manuals and support stuff, that is a gold mine of content and ideas of what to write about. Like, how do I use this, or how do I integrate, this platform with that platform? If you don't have that type of content, someone else is going to write it. And I can't go back. There was other examples that I'll talk about too. Picking keywords. So when I start to think about it, it kind of trickles down to your question earlier. It's like, how do you know which keyword for what? It depends on what Google's showing. So what's the intent of the keyword? How does it line up with our service pages, our e-commerce pages, our landing pages, our blog content, videos, whatever type of content you have? Where does it line up? And what's Google showing? Sometimes certain keywords, it'll say, we want to make a service page out of this, or this is more of a landing page. And I'm like, honestly, look at Google. Google has shown me, again, 2 media people, 3 aggregators, and 4 of your competitors, and all of your competitors, it has a blog post. And it's like this super long, detailed guide. We can create a 300-word blog post for you, but you're never going to rank. Google is looking for really deep answers for this keyword. And other times, very simple. When you start thinking about it, best, guides, types, comparing, the who, what, why, Why do people need your certain product? What's their problems? Which one is this? I think this is from Chewy. So I'm sure most people here have a dog, cat, some sort of pet. Did you know that there are 5 gazillion types of pet food out there? Like my wife just tried a new rehydratable cat food for one of our elderly cats. She just bought it yesterday. I'm like, what? I work with a cat food company and I didn't know there was such a thing. But there's so much stuff about weight control, and he is a chunky cat if you're curious. There's so many different variations. Have you gone shopping for a laptop recently? What kind of OS do you want? What screen size do you want? These are all modifiers that people are looking for that can alter your keyword research. This one is from Puma.com. Like, Macy's, Target, depending on the clothing that you're looking at, it all changes. And there's so many different variations for those. Each of these could have a landing page, and people are searching for color, size, different uses. I worked with one company that did rugs. It was a problem because every variable, there was like 60 or 70 different variables, and depending on the order, the URLs changed. But they had a landing page for everything. And there's like, if you were looking for a 3x5 plaid woven rug, they had a landing page for it. And so the amount of keyword research you could, in theory, do was just astronomical. So picking keywords, take some of those filters and start applying them to, like I was saying, your keywords. Best video editing software. Take a look and see the types of content that's showing up. And the ones I highlighted are all news or types of aggregators. Adobe and WeVideo are the only products that made, I think, the top 8 or so. So if you're thinking about trying to unseat or trying to look at your keyword research, you really need to look at the different keywords, the type of content, how that all intersects. And this one was for what is video editing software? Here's some videos. If you had a podcast, you could possibly show up to answer it. There's people also ask. There's all these different things. So when I look at keyword research, I look at lots of data and I look at lots of things, but I also then take a step back and go, what kind of content do we have? What kind of content are we able to produce? And how can I get us or the client in front of those people? Here's another thing that's always fun. We'll find out who's from Chicago and where everyone's from. Who has ever used the term sneakers? Who uses sneakers? Are you all from the East Coast? Yes. Who says tennis shoes? So you're all from everywhere else. Hawaiians just say shoes, because they do. Chicago and Cincinnati, if you grew up here, I always wore gym shoes. And it is gym shoes. It's also the same. There's also an interesting thing, and I couldn't find one, with trucks, semi-trailers, 18-wheelers. Depending on where in the US you are, they use different ones. Australians also have their own vocab that I don't even try. Then there's also the Brits who do speak some sort of crazy English. They call it the boot. We call it a trunk. You're going to put it in your boot or you're going to put it in your trunk. Boot means lots of different things. So when you're doing keyword research, think about not just, we're only doing English, we're only doing Spanish, we're only doing, here in Chicago, Polish or Russian or any other languages you're worried about. Like, we're not an international company. No, you knew. Like, lawyer versus attorney, I have daily arguments with. I had arguments when I worked with a really large insurance company about car insurance versus auto insurance. Which one do we want on the homepage? Which one do people search for? So don't get too hung up on them, but do pay attention. And some people just call it soda pop. We call it pop here. Depending on where you're from, again, it all means the same, but if you're doing keyword research, kind of think about those regional. Are you just targeting people here in Chicago, the Southwest? Everyone calls something different. And so then there's also the first 10 years of SEO, we tried to create content, one piece of content, one keyword. Please don't do that anymore. Think about your keywords in topics. So I was talking about like best video editing software or best payroll service or best insert, whatever your product is. Look at keywords and look at the types of content, whether it's a blog post, service page, video, what types of content can you aggregate together? Look in your Google Search Console, look in your Bing Webmaster, look and see what pages. Some of my clients sometimes will literally have 2,000 different keyword variations that it's geo-modified, best, near me. There's so many thousands of keywords that a single page can rank for. Don't think about how every single page only is one keyword. So there's also a couple other things, topic versus keyword, entity. There's slight differences. I have some links in here about entity stuff. Dixon, who used to work for Majestic, now works for Inlinks, which is a really cool tool, inlinks.net. Really talks about, and he wrote a book about entity SEO. The difference between topic, keyword, and entity is slight, and I'll just say that entity is anything that has a Wikipedia is the shortest way. If it has a Wikipedia entry, it's an entity. Otherwise, it's just a topic and keyword kind of scrolls down. So if a topic would be, conferences, Chicago conferences, the keyword would be DigiMarCon. And so here's a couple of resources. Sorry, we had more questions than I planned. So for quick research, so if anyone has ever had someone come over to their desk and say, hey, today we have a press release going out. Hey, today I need a piece of content about this topic. Oh, hey, we just launched this new product and we should have told you about it in the meeting 2 weeks ago, but we didn't. Can you do some keyword research because the writers are waiting for you? These next couple slides will kind of walk you through it. Quora Answers. Sometimes searching Twitter is interesting, sometimes run away. Reddit is also the same way. Any forum like that, you can find all sorts of really cool stuff. You can also find some crazy stuff. SEMrush, Ahrefs are also tools if you have access to them. They have free versions as well. Tons of ideas that you can pull out of there. Just search Google. What kind of content shows up? Is it a service page? Is it a video? What kind of content are you going to create? Is it really high level, bullet pointed, simple content, or is it some crazy guide that you just can't compete for? And then you might have to look at different keywords and ideas. There was one that I thought was interesting was sour beer, sea salt and dogfish head. If anyone's ever had it, it's called Sequence Ale. It's actually quite good. I was just shocked that it was showing up, so +1 to their marketing team. Keyword research ideation. Again, look at what kind of content is showing up in Pinterest. Has anyone ever used Google Trends? Take a look at there to see how people, and sometimes that'll show you interesting things between like an auto and car or different types of shoes like I was talking about. You can see how different people, and it'll actually show you where in the regions people are searching for things. SEMrush, Ahrefs all have different stuff. Also, look at your Google Search Console and Bing. There's tons of content, tons of ideas in there. And here's, for like payroll services, if you're thinking about just quick topics to give to a writer, Google gives you on the bottom other things people search for. Just scroll to the bottom and look at those other items. Do any of them make sense for your business? Are any of them things you have not covered before? Infinite Suggest takes a keyword and it basically just keeps seeing what Google is suggesting to people. Again, it's a free tool if you're kind of just in a pinch looking for ideas. And Lsi Graph is also very similar. So if you're ever with a friend in a different city at a bar and someone that works at a really big brewery shows up, that's your validation. That's what this photo is. Google Trends, Keyword Planner. If you have a paid team or if you're on the paid team, use your paid data. Use your own analytics data to validate that, yes, these types of keywords are out there. Look at your Google Search Console. Do we already have content that ranks for it or has ranked for it, but we just aren't optimized for it? So in Chicago, if you don't know who this is, it's Harry Carey. There is a restaurant down the street, great food. We're going to go a little bit deeper with a home run into the keyword research. Is there any questions so far? We had a lot of questions earlier, but I was just curious. Nope. So if you're doing an internal review is usually my first step. Listen to sales calls. Listen to customer service. If you're on the marketing team, we all have our own speak. We have our own brand speak. Company has its own way of calling things. What does the customer say? What does the prospect say? How do they phrase it? Do you actually mention that keyword on your site? CRM notes from either one also works. In your analytics, see if you have site search turned on for tracking. You can track what people are searching for. That tells you immediately what your site stinks at helping them find. Is it support? Is it a question? Is it just a product, SKU? What kind of stuff are they looking for that you just can't, they're not finding? Paid click data is awesome. I'm an SEO. I have done paid, but I love, especially for e-commerce clients, I love paid data. I love knowing what is getting impressions, what's getting clicks, and where the money is coming from. Because if I have to build out content for 3 months and wait for 6 months, I want to know that they've been converting it for the last year on the paid side. Look at testimonials and reviews. There's all sorts of different ways that people talk about things. I also like to go through, and these are just some screenshots of, I look at our internal content before. So if anyone's ever furniture shopping, this is not the best analogy, but do you look around and say, wow, we already have a lamp here. We already have a couch. Or do you just go out and just buy all new furniture for no reason? You want to do an assessment of what you have first. Or maybe a better one is, cooking dinner for your mom last night or your wife or your partner. Did you just go out and food shop, or did you actually check to see what you had in the house? Whenever I do keyword research, I like to first figure out what keywords they rank for, what do they do well, where do we have content, maybe it's just not updated or optimized, and try to understand where they're already ranking. And you can kind of see the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 is me trying to understand which keywords have a lot of traffic, have a lot of opportunity. Just some more to think about. Trying to answer people's questions. What problems do they have? Do you solve it? Or are all of your pages just about how you're so awesome and here's what we do? So often, especially with SaaS companies, it's all about just them, and it never actually talks. And I never can find any content that says, this is your problem. This is what our feature that does that. I already mentioned some of these, but look at Wikipedia. What kind of content is on there? What it has entities. Look in online Facebook groups. When I was talking earlier about how I would look in different groups and answer questions with my podcast stuff, looking in joining Facebook groups that are related to your industry, what do people ask about? There's an Ngram tool, which is interesting, and it uses Google Suggest and kind of figures out what those higher end topics are. There's a keyword grouping tool that's out there. There's a couple of them. If you want to export your 25 or 40,000 keywords from your Google Search Console or your paid data, drop it in there, and it'll actually help group. And it almost creates like an ad group for you, but it'll help you kind of look for general ideas and general topics. Like, do you always talk about the cities? Or are you a local regional company who just has no cities in there? This is something I also like to use. Scraping, especially when I'm doing podcast ideation, scrape podcasts that are in that space for their titles, and then look and see what comes out of their RSS. And then you can also take that and apply it to other tools. So if you have a competitor that has a blog with lots of content, take their RSS or their sitemap XML, go through, parse it out so you just get the titles, and then see what kind of titles are out there, what keyword research applies to it. For the 1 or 2 people that might get this reference, thank you. Having my wife explain this show to me all the time was paid off. This is Dan, and he likes to judge people. When you're looking at your keyword research, look at your current rankings, your competitors, try to understand what your competitors rank for that you don't. Use your paid data, use any data you can, and then start trying to understand your quarterly goals and how it all ties in. So when you start to prioritize, so this is really what everyone wants. This is, hurry up, Dave. I want to see what keyword tools I should be using. use your Search Console. Please, please, please use your Search Console. Google took away lots of data at one point, but they do give it back in some cases with Google Search Console. Bing Webmaster also gives you a lot of data. And then, there's a lot of other tools that Google gives you. For Excel, I've used Analytics Edge in the past. Most recently, I've been using, this is called SEO Tools for Excel. When you go into Google Search Console, you can only get 1,000 rows of pages or 1,000 rows of keywords out. With any of these that use the API, for one client each month, I think I export 230,000 keywords using the API and using any of these tools. It's like 100, both of these tools are like 100 to 150 a year, but they give me so much more data and it does it in a couple minutes. Supermetrics, if you've ever used it, is great. It's also very expensive compared to these other tools, but it does very similar and it taps you into all sorts of data that you can only dream of getting. And there's also some free tools out there. And again, here's some links. Search Analytics for Sheets. It uses the API and it pulls it in. If you have a really, really large site though, the problem with Google Sheets, if you've ever worked in it, is it doesn't handle that much data. But if you have a smaller data set, it's a great tool. There's also Google Sheets for Marketers is another tool. And then there's actually a cool tool I found a couple weeks ago that it kind of walks you through some keyword research, but it also can go through and grab the intent of the keywords for you. So if you're not sure if you want to batch 5,000 or lots of keywords, it might help you. Do we have any developers? Do anyone like working with developers or have developers that are bored? If you do, I'd love to talk to you because there's some really cool tools you can build with Python. If you are strapped for budget, but you have developer resources, I would say look at these. Those other tools that I just walked you through, in most cases, will do most of what you want. Unless you have some crazy legal issues. Like I worked with clients who can't use Google Analytics. They can only work with Omniture because of legal stuff. Like they can't use any Google things. If you have different rules or legal hurdles, sometimes Python or internal tools, or if you just have that much data, internal tools like this are the way to go. This is one that starts aggregating, looks at query intent, and if you have hundreds of thousands of keywords, this is kind of the way to go. Data Studio, there are lots and lots of free or easy to find templates, base starting places to go with that'll straight integrate with your Google Search Console. Power BI is a tool I've used a lot. When you have really large data sets with SEO and SEM, I use it to combine and start looking for patterns and start looking to see where do we rank really well for certain terms SEO, but not with paid, and vice versa. And I can work with the paid team to try to understand our data and their data and look for opportunities for them to decrease spend and us to create more content or for them to move budget around. SEMrush, Ahrefs, and Inlinks are all also great tools. So a little bit about me. I was once a developer. I'm reformed mostly-ish, and now just a marketer. I'm not sure which one sometimes is better or worse. That was my little kid up on Whacker when I had to take him to work one day when he was like 1. But I'm here based in Chicago. I work with small and large companies, Fortune 50 all the way down. Some of the places I've spoken. If you want to talk beer, I will talk beer, marketing, sports. I don't want to talk about the Cubs right now or most days, but we can try. So I am in Chicago, in Soldier Field. I had to have super fans. So we got 4 minutes between us and your lunch. Is there any other questions now that I posed it that way? Everyone's got keyword research? No questions? Expected all the questions now, not on podcasting. I don't know, boss. I guess that's it. Thank you all.